Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Merritt and Andrew coming at you today to talk about best practices in a workflow and even creating and building some public templates. There's still some folks jumping on the meeting, so we're just going to give everybody a minute or so to get settled here, and we'll jump in here in just a few. You're in the right spot, so I just wanted to welcome you all, and like I said, we'll be back here in just a few to get started. All right. Looks like we are ready to get started. I am actually going to turn things over to Andrew to get started here, and just some housekeeping here on these webinars. We do have everybody muted. Just makes for a better end user experience. So that way I know everybody's busy and may have people coming in and out of your office or phones ringing in the background. So we do have everybody muted on the presentation today. However, in that web control panel kind of thing you're probably seeing over on the right hand side of your screen, there is a questions box there. So if you do have questions as we walk through the presentation today, please feel free to type those in. We might have some time even to kind of circle back and answer some questions live during the presentation today, or Andrew will be getting back with you and answering any questions kind of as we move through, or even post presentation today. So don't be shy. Ask questions if you have anything in that questions box there, and we'll be sure to address that information. Andrew, are you ready to take over?
I am ready. Can you
All
see my
right.
screen over?
I sure can. Yes. Perfect.
Good. Go. Well, yes, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Feel free to ask questions. I'll try to answer them during the meeting, or if not, obviously afterwards. But to click through, we're going to be doing workflow and public templates today. The two people on the line, we've somewhat introduced ourselves, but to formally introduce ourselves, it's Merritt Brooks, who will be running through everything, who's a wizard in the BoardDocs solution, and then myself, Andrew Klein. Not as much as a wizard, but I do know a little bit. Oops, went the wrong way. What I will do, I'll give you a brief overview of BoardDocs on the different versions of the platform. Some of you might already know this. Some of you might just be on LT, or you could be on Pro Plus, who knows. But the differences are as follows. So the LT tool, you'll get the agenda piece, which is the big part of BoardDocs is the agenda creation. You also have the policy piece, where you can manage all of your policies. And then in LT, you also have a minutes tool. It's akin to a Word document, but it's an area where you can do your minutes and keep them in BoardDocs. And then you also have the search feature, which is huge, especially with meta search, where you can search all the public information of all of our clients. And then you have a video integration capability as well. So if you're videotaping your meetings now, you'd be able to add them to BoardDocs and even timestamp them. So you can, if you only wanted to watch one section, you could click on it and watch that. So that's all what you'd get in LT. In Pro, you get all of that. You would also get the electronic workflow piece, which we'll be talking about today. You get a robust minutes tool, which streamlines the minutes, which I'm a huge fan of. We've had a webinar in the past on that. I'm sure we'll have another one. There is a voting tool in our minutes tool as well, where you can record votes. There's also the ability to annotate. So your board members have private annotations in Pro. And then lastly, but not least at all, is the library section. You get a general area to put anything that you might already have on your website in the libraries tool, but you might want your board members to have access to it, or you might want it to be searchable. Also, in the libraries tool, there's a whole goal tracking functionality. So you can track all the goals that might be your district might have, whether it's on as a district level or maybe for just the board themselves, what they're tracking themselves on. You also get the policy and the search and the video integration. So that's Pro. You get a couple extra things in there. And then Plus can be added to either one. Plus, you can add unlimited meeting bodies, whether they're private or public is up to you. And you basically have separate areas for each one of them. So if you have an audit committee, you have a whole separate area that the audit committee can have their agendas. They can vote if they're on Pro, do all that. And then there's different administrators too. So if there's a certain person that does a lot of work with your governance committee, they could be set up to only have access to work in a governance committee. And so that's why you have different access levels and different voting members for each group. So those are the 3 different versions of our product. Obviously, if there's any questions about that, feel free to reach out. Yeah, that's just a quick little overview. As you know, we have ongoing training and support. So if there's anything today that you see that you wanted to get trained on, we can schedule that. We can have a remote training for you. Or if there's just something that, a quick fix that you might have, call our 24/7 support team. They're amazing. They do a lot of great work. But on that note, I will hand it back over to Merritt.
Well, good deal. Yes. So, and I don't know, you probably might want to add this back to our slides as well. We usually have our eGov Live conference on that last slide as well, because that's included with your BoardDocs subscription agreement. And I think we're allowed to announce.
I think we can. I think we
can. If not, all of you are getting some VIP information here. But our eGov Live conference will be held this year in September. And as most of you know, I see some familiar names and faces on here that have been before. It's a great conference. It does change location from year to year. And in 2018, it will be at the JW Marriott in Orlando, which is amazing. It looks beautiful. I've already looked up the pictures and seen the palm trees and dreamed of being in warmer weather, since this winter seems to be lasting a little bit longer than I'd like for it to. But it will be a great time. It is included with your BoardDocs subscription agreement. So we always encourage everybody to come out. It's a great time to put names and faces together. We have some sessions on BoardDocs topics, but we also have sessions on all different types of topics and interesting and motivating things. We feed you breakfast and lunch each day. It's great networking to meet with other folks that are utilizing BoardDocs, but also work within the same industry as yourselves. So put that on your calendar. I will pull up the dates here towards the end of our presentation so you guys can see what the exact dates are. I want to say it's like the 13th through the 15th, but I'm not positive on that. But I'll show you where you can find that information out on our website as well. So hopefully we can see you guys all in Orlando later this year. So I've shared my screen. Are you seeing my BoardDocs screen, Andrew?
I can.
Yay, good deal. So yeah, just like Andrew said, we're going to be talking about public templates and workflow today. Workflow in the BoardDocs sense is a tool that is available only in our BoardDocs Pro package. So if you are utilizing, say, the LT package of BoardDocs, maybe different departments or different individuals who are creating the supporting documents or the information that pertains to your meeting packets and agendas, maybe right now they're sending all that information over to you, via email. Who knows, maybe they're walking across the office and handing it to you, and then you're creating those agenda items for them and putting those into the meeting packet for them. This would be a great scenario where Pro would really make things a lot easier and streamlined for you, because with the Pro version and that workflow piece, different people can be responsible for their own agenda items, and they can create those in BoardDocs and submit them over to you in BoardDocs. So it takes out that extra step there and really streamlines that whole process. And it can be very simple, just like that. Maybe it's just something I create my report, I send it over to you so it goes onto the agenda. It can also be a more complex or a more detailed approval process. If I have a contract that I need to send over to my legal team so they can review that contract, and then maybe it needs to go over to my director's office so that they can review that information prior to coming back over to you or to your office where it goes onto the agenda or the meeting packet. So these can also be collaborative things. If I needed to create a report, somebody else is going to add additional information to it. It's going to go through person A, person B, person C, and I do have an electronic time and date stamp on each of those items as it's coming through that workflow process. So a great tool, again, to streamline the collaboration of building your meeting packets and agendas, also getting everyone to turn in information in a timely manner. Because like I said, it does time and date stamp that, those agenda items as they're coming through that workflow process. Great tool for keeping everybody accountable for getting all their information turned in and approving that information through the approval process in a timely manner as well. So we'll walk through that. In addition to that, we are also going to walk through setting up public templates. Now, the public templates piece is available in our LT or Pro. It works the same in both. And what this will allow you to do is to develop a template in that public content area that will pre-populate on your agenda items. Great tool if you like to keep a consistent layout on each agenda item as part of your meeting packet. Perhaps there's information or details that you provide every time on every agenda item. And if we build out that template, then of course we don't have to retype that information in each and every time. It just kind of guides us along of the information that we want to present along with that agenda item. Also, if you're utilizing that workflow piece, then this is a great tool. That template will guide people that are using that workflow piece through the information and the layout that you like. And that way, then it's just telling them, hey, here's the information you need to include on the agenda item you're creating. And you don't have to reformat that information because you've already developed that formatting or that template within BoardDocs. So it's already set. So without further ado, let's jump in here and we'll walk through this. And again, keep in mind, if you do come across any questions as we move through our presentation today, please feel free to ask those. I'm happy to answer, or we'll take some pauses in the middle. And Andrew will let me know if any questions are coming through. And then we'll probably even have some time at the end to review any questions if there's any additional ones there. But I'm going to go up to my little person up here into my BoardDocs options. And let's take a look at some of the options and settings on this back side of BoardDocs that help populate or build our workflow and our public templates. Under my board and committee settings, and one thing to note here, if you are utilizing LT Plus or Pro Plus, that public template is customized based on the committee or meeting type we have selected over here on the left-hand side, which is really nice because if we have one specific template for our board of trustees and a totally different template, for our, public safety or our zoning board, we can customize that template based on the committee or based on the meeting group we have selected over on that left-hand side. Our template is going to reside under our agenda tab. This is all the information that pertains to the customization of the committee, of the agenda based on that committee we have selected over on that left-hand side. And if you scroll down here back to the very bottom, you'll see there is a section for public template. And if I click in that box, it'll open up another screen where I have all my editing features here, and I can build out this public template. Now, this is just an example of one I created here, but if we always wanted, the subject of the information, maybe who's presenting this information, any information they need to pertain or give along with this agenda item here. If we have a board recommendation that we want to guide them through, maybe some background information or even contact people here, then we can build this out. I put this in a table just so we can kind of look at how fancy we can get with our template here. And even I've seen some folks, and I think it's a good idea that if you want to say, hey, all attachments need to be uploaded as a PDF. Again, if we're using this template in that workflow process, this is guiding those folks that are submitting agenda items through the information that we want them to see within the agenda itself. Okay. All of these tools here, we've covered the majority of those in our formatting webinar. So if you have any questions on those, let us know. We're happy to help, but we'll walk through some of the most common formatting tools when we actually get into the workflow piece. But that is where we set up our public template. Also, I'm going to go over here to my email tab because we do have some email notifications that pertain to the workflow piece as well. This top one for approvals is letting us know or asking us when an item is approved through the workflow process, do you want the submitter to receive an email that says, hey, your item's been approved within BoardDocs? So this is a great email notification. That way they don't have to contact you to follow their item or see if it's been approved. Just as their item makes its way through that workflow process and their item is approved, they'll receive an email that says, hey, your item has been approved within BoardDocs. And on our user access tab here, so if you're the super publisher, of course you have access to global settings and board and committee settings. If you are the publisher for your board or your committee over here on that left-hand side, you can also determine who has access to this workflow piece as well. So it's individualized or customizable based on that committee or that group on the left-hand side, again, if you're using the plus version of BoardDocs. If I scroll down here into my administrative box, these are the folks that can see, administrative content, and they can also view public content, cannot view any executive content. They can also participate in the workflow piece. So if you're going to allow folks to submit items into that workflow piece or over onto your agenda, then we'll want to make sure their names are in this administrative box. And we can just grab, drag, and drop their names into that box from that left-hand column over there. If you are the publisher for your committee or your meeting group, you'll of course want to talk with one of your super publishers to get your folks set up in this left-hand list here, because your super publishers are the people that can add people into the list here. However, once they're in the list, you can easily drag and drop their name into that administrative box depending on where they need to go. Okay. I'm going to walk up here. I'm just going to save those changes there. And I'm going to hop over here to my workflow tab. So here is where we set up our customization for the workflow. This top option here is asking, do we want to require approval? If you select no, what that means is that folks that are using that workflow process do not have to have any sort of approval for the agenda item to go onto the agenda. It's simply they go into their folder, create their item, and that item goes onto your agenda. Okay. You can also select for action items only. So if it's a discussion item, an information item, perhaps they don't have to have anybody's approval for that item to go onto the agenda. However, if it is an action item, it will request that they submit a tree to submit that item through so that at least one person has to approve that item. Or if you prefer all items that are coming from outside sources or coming from other people go through some sort of approval process, then you can select that for all items, and it will prompt any item that someone is trying to submit over to your agenda. It will prompt it to be approved by at least one person. Okay. Here we have a series of yes and no answers. So, do we want to allow the administrative staff to view the agenda in draft state? We usually suggest that we set this to yes. The reason being, as those administrative users are submitting items through that workflow process, then they can also go view the draft agenda and see where their item is. Are they first in the meeting? Are they last in the meeting? Just kind of not have to bug you and see where they are in that meeting packet. They can just view that information in that draft area. Same thing here. Do we want to allow our administrative staff to submit agenda items? This is what turns on the submission process for our administrative staff. So if we're going to be utilizing the workflow process, then we most certainly want to make sure that is set to yes. Right below that, it asks, what about those executive level users? Generally, our board members, council members, do you want them to be able to view the meeting in draft state? Now, that's up to you. I have some folks that are, no way, Jose, we don't let our board see the meeting until we make it active. Whereas we have other subscribers that make it available for their board to see in that draft state. And that's just up to you if you prefer that to be a yes or no. If we have this set at no, what that's indicating is once our meeting packet is made active, then our executive level users would be able to see it. While it was in our draft meeting state, only the administrative users would be able to see it. Okay. What about our default access on agenda items? Do we want to default it to public or private? If this is all going to be part of a public meeting packet, we can just leave it at public. And then it asks, do we want to allow them to change it? Do you want to allow them to change it from public to private? And so you could just select that as a yes or no as well. The agenda item workflow history here is that time and date stamp that I was talking about. It will show the time and date that the item was submitted, and it will show the time and date of each step it took through that approval process. We do suggest that we at least make this visible to the administrators. These are the folks that are using the workflow process and submitting the agenda items. So it's a good idea to make that information visible to them. However, if you also want to share that with the public or even with your executive committee or your executive staff, you can most certainly choose those additional boxes as well. Okay. Once we have all of our setup here in the workflow tab, the next process would be setting up those approval trees. And these approval trees can be very simple, and they could be something like, Merit approves. Oops. And I can simply grab my name over here, and maybe I'm going to be the approval on that item. Okay. Or it could be, hey, this is a budget item. So that means it needs to go over to Brooks. Charlotte's got to look at it. Karen has to look at it, and Andrew needs to look at it. Or maybe this is just something that's going through the executive director's office or HR or through our legal department. So we can title these trees and drag and drop names from that left-hand side into this box here. And these are the folks that will approve the items in the order they are listed within the box. So if I were to send something over to my legal department, Charlotte would receive an email first. Once she approves that item, Brooks would receive that next email. And finally, Karen. And once Karen approved it, it would go onto my meeting packet or agenda. If you would like to be the last person in that approval tree, you can most certainly add yourself last on each approval tree so that as it makes its way through the approval process and you want to be that last person that says, okay, thumbs up, this item is in the right spot on the right packet and looks good for my agenda, then you could add yourself as the last person. You can also appear in a tree twice. So maybe I need to be the first person to review the outline or the report itself, but then I was going to send it over to maybe 2 or 3 other people who were going to add some information to it and then send it back to me so that I can review that information prior to going to the agenda. So you can be on approval tree twice if you'd like as well. Okay. Very easy to set these up. Also, if you have one that you don't need, we can delete it and it removes it right out of there. But once you set these up, and the best way to do that is kind of identify the items on your agenda, where they come from, and how they get through the approval process, currently. Or is it something you're emailing over to this department and they're sharing it or looking at that information there and then sending it back to you? And can we duplicate or replicate that system or that process here under our approval trees? Okay. Of course, we would want to save any options. And again, if you're using the plus version of BoardDocs, these trees, the workflow, the public template is all customizable based on the committee or the meeting group you have selected over on this left-hand side. So you may have very different trees or very different approval processes based on that committee or that group over on the left. Okay, I'm just going to close out of here. And anytime we make any changes under our options and settings on that back side of BoardDocs, always a good idea to refresh your screen. That just pulls those options and settings in and makes those changes take place. So here are a couple of things I do want to point out right from our initial featured page or our dashboard here, where we can access different topics and different information that we have featured. Right here, front and center, is a box called My Items. Now, not everybody is seeing this box here. Only it is visible to me based on my username and password because these are my items that I have within Workflow. If there was an item that was waiting on my approval, then I would also see an item here that would say waiting on you. Hey, Merritt, I'm waiting on you to approve this item. So really easily identifiable what's in your workflow and what items are waiting on your approval right from this initial dashboard or this screen here. Of course, if you are a board member or you are a staff member that did not participate in that workflow process, then that box would not be visible to you. Again, it's customizable based on your username and password. So if I wanted to get into my items or to my workspace here, I could simply click on one of these items here and it would take me directly over to that area. Now, upon initially utilizing the workflow process, probably won't have any items in your box or in your folder there. So to get to that area, under my Meetings tab, under my upside down arrow, this My Agenda Items is my own personal workspace. Other folks can't see my items. I can't see other folks' items. This is where I can work in my folder here on items that I'm submitting, items I'm creating, maybe items I'm responsible for on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, whatever that may be. And I can utilize this folder here really quite creatively. If I have an item that's due every April, I can go ahead and create it in my little draft folder over here that says, hey, this item's due every April. Or maybe I have a report that has a specific layout that I use, that's due on a quarterly basis, and I just want to go ahead and create my template here in BoardDocs or in my agenda items folder, where I can just then use this as a template to submit that report over. I don't have to recreate that item every time. If you are starting from scratch, and that's what we're going to do here, if I go up to my little hamburger icon here and go down to my new agenda item, I've got some details that I'm going to present or be asked for up here at the top. One thing it's asking is, what meeting is this going to go to? Now, maybe I'm creating an item for the May meeting packet, so it's not even available yet. And that's okay. I don't have to select a meeting date from that top box if I don't want to. Okay. If I don't select a meeting date, it's not going to prompt me for a category either. But maybe I can just say, this is going to be my HR report. And this access here is not referring to who can see this information right now. I think that's one of our top questions folks ask, who can see this information? I don't want it to go to the public right now. That's not what this is referring to. Nobody's seeing this while we're in your My Agenda Items folder. It's just asking, is this eventually going to be part of a public meeting? So most of the time, you're probably going to leave that as a public item. In our item type box here is where we want to, as a best practice, always select at least one item type per agenda item. Okay. For BoardDocs, for some of our search features and some of our minutes features, it actually pulls from this item type box. So, we can most certainly say this is a report, and maybe this is going to be just for information or discussion. We can select more than one. However, we, as a best practice, always want to assign at least one. If this is an action item, BoardDocs will populate some additional fields here, where if any of these fields pertain to the item that you're submitting, you can most certainly fill those out. If it does not, no big deal. You can leave those blank. It doesn't show those as blank within your item itself. It'll only populate the boxes that we do fill out. So maybe, I wanted to say this was going to be $250. And yes, I have budgeted for this and we are good to go. And that's the only 2 items I have filled out. Then that's going to be the only ones I fill out. If you are linking your goals or your strategic plan or projects or grant money within BoardDocs and want to link those together, that's where you would do that as well. Maybe this was part of my, my technology bond here, and I can link those together right there. If you select the wrong one, if you click on this again, it just moves it back over, and I could say, I wanted to, link this to a different one here. Okay. Those goals are all set up under the library, under the strategic planning or the strategic plan tool there. I'm not going to select my approval tree here. Oh, let me back up right here. My recommended action here, it is a good idea if we want to go ahead and fill this out because it populates into the meeting minutes. So, if I wanted to say, motion to approve, as presented, or whatever wording that you guys typically use to build that information into your meeting minutes. So it makes that a little easier later on. But I'm not going to select my approval tree quite yet because I'm just going to be building out some of my information that's part of my item that I've selected. Now you'll see that that template that we set up in the public template under our options and settings has now appeared here. So it's nice for me using this workflow process. I know the layout is already set for me, and I know what type of information they're asking me to consider or to present along with this agenda item. So maybe if my subject was my, new hires for, I don't know, 2018, whatever my, if I'm the presenter, Merit, oops, I can set up my name here. If there's other information that I want to build into the meeting or my information I'm providing here, I most certainly can. If I have specific wording or that I want to have on this recommendation. And one reason I went ahead and built this table in here is to show you some of the flexibility with our table tool. I have some folks that are getting quite fancy with the formatting and building out tables and memos and things like that in this public content area. It looks really nice. Our table tool is right here above. You'll see it looks like that little grid there. Once you select your table tool here, you can build out how many rows, how many columns you need. If you leave your border size at a 1 or bigger, the borders will show. Whereas we set the borders to a 0, the borders become invisible. I can also set my alignment if I want that to appear centered or left or right aligned. The caption will appear at the top of the table, kind of like a title of what the table is. And for ADA compliances, our summary will indicate what type of information is located within the table. So good idea to go ahead and build that out as well. One thing that we would suggest that you do change when you're setting up a table is this width here. That 500 is referring to pixels, and 500 pixels varies quite greatly based on the device you're using. 500 pixels is very different on my smartphone versus my tablet versus my big screen monitor. So we would suggest that you change this to a percentage. And if I were to use, say, for 100%, what that's telling me is that will take up 100% of the space I have available on the device I'm using. Okay, we don't have to put in 100%. We could put in, 80% or 90% or 50%, just dependent on how big you want your table to be. But by changing that to a percentage as opposed to pixels, just makes for a better end user experience. So folks don't have to scroll left and right to see the information within that table. Okay. Now, since I've already got a table created, I'm not going to create my table here, but I do want to show you some of the functionality within the table itself. So if I right-click on my table here, what I did is I went into my cell properties, and you can see here, we also have some functionality very similar to other, Excel or Word when you're creating tables in other places or other applications. Do I want to merge my cells down? Do I want to split those horizontally? But I can also get into my cell properties. I can set the width of my table to stay, 50% on each side so that my cells don't move left and right as I'm creating information. I can choose if I want my words to wrap or if I want my words to be horizontally or vertically aligned, to the center or right and left. I can choose my background color, and that's where I went to choose that gray color there. I'll just set it to pink so you can see something different, but I can set that background color there. Okay. So a really nice way to present information. And again, when we get back into that right click, I can also insert a row if I needed to, insert a column if I needed to. So some different functionality that you have, very similar, like I said, to creating tables and other applications. Okay. So as we build out our information here, another option that we have is creating bulleted and numbered lists. And I just want to go into some of the functionality of that as well, because I have folks do that quite often. So here I just created that bulleted list, and I'll scroll down here. Some of the functionality that we have here, and I'm actually going to go to my 4 arrows here that take us out to full screen so we can see that information a little better. These 4 arrows here, just a maximize button. It is a toggle switch, so you can click on it again to go back into the regular BoardDocs screen, but it just gives you a bigger workspace, if you will. But utilizing my bulleted list and my numbered list options here, I do have some functionality here to right-click, and I can change those numbers to Roman numerals or letters, uppercase, lowercase, just depending on how you wanted that information presented, and it will update that. I can also embed lists within a list. So let's say that this was going to be a list within my Roman numeral 1. If I came up here and utilized my increase indent button here, you'll see now that I'm having another list here, my second list. Okay. And maybe this third one was actually going to be my Roman numeral 2. I could use my decrease indent to move that back out to that left-hand side where I can continue on with my list. I see I misspelled my number there. And then same thing, if I needed to get down to another level or embed another list, I could come into my increase indent button and continue creating that list there. So utilizing that increase indent and decrease indent button here will move things over to the right in creating that embedded list. Also move items back over to the left to go back out to my Roman numerals or my main list. I can even use it within a list within a list. And on these, I can also right click here if I wanted those to be different. Say I wanted those to be lowercase letters or whatever I wanted those to be. Now, if I hit my enter button, it adds a new number or letter here. Maybe I just wanted to double space this list without adding new letters or numbers. And that is also an option. So if I hit hold my shift key down and hit my enter, then I'm adding in a space without adding in an additional letter or number. Okay. So I'm just double spacing some of this information here so you can get an idea of how that would work if you wanted to double space that list. So again, that is our numbered list option here. Works the same with our bulleted list option as well. And then utilizing our increase and decrease indent tools there to move that information in as embedding that list over to the right, and also move our list back out to that left-hand side if it needed to go back out to part of our Roman numerals. Okay. So let's say I'm going back into my BoardDocs screen. Maybe this is an item, a layout that I'm going to be utilizing from month to month, or maybe I submit this on a quarterly basis, but I like this layout. I don't want to have to go in and recreate all of my information again. I kind of just want to save this as a template because I like the way that it looks. And I can most certainly do that. I'm going to go up here to my item here, and I'm just going to tell myself, hey, this is going to be my template. And I can obviously not talk and type at the same time, but there we go. And I can save this. So here's my little save floppy disk item over here. And I can see over here now in my draft folder on this left-hand side, I've got my HR report that's just a template. It's not linked to any particular meeting. I didn't say where it was heading. I haven't put it through that workflow process. But now I have my table laid out here. I have all my lists, my embedded lists here. And I can utilize this format as my item to submit moving forward. Maybe I am ready to submit my item. So what I would do is I would come over in my draft folder here, and I have my template. I can right click on my template and I can duplicate it. That's going to build a copy of that template there. And then maybe this is the one that I'm going to add my supporting documents to. Make sure all my information is correct here. I come over to my edit pencil here. On this one, you know what? This one is going to be due in April. So I can go ahead and put it into my April meeting. Well, it's going to go under my, my announcements and reports area. I probably want to take the word template out of my item here. I can probably take out this copy of here. All of my item types are already selected for you or for me. If I needed to update this information, maybe this item is going to be $500. Yes, I've got my recommended action here. All of my information here, maybe I needed to update my subject line, or I needed to come and update any of the folks or people or information within my list. I can update any of this information here. Of course, I can go down to my public files box. Maybe here's where I'm going to add in my supporting documents. I can drag and drop those in. I can also highlight multiple attachments or documents to load in, or I can double click on information as well. So just depending on how you want that information to go into that attachment file. I can also, I'm going to grab one more item here. I can also, if I were to click on this gray box here, that will collapse all of my content areas. So I can see my administrative content area, my executive content area, and their file boxes here. Perhaps I meant for that one to go under my executive box there. While we have these boxes collapsed, we can drag and drop and move attachments between those content areas here. I can also, if they were within one content area, if I needed to reorganize them or change the order of how they're going to reside within that content area, I can drag and drop to move those around as well. Okay. So let's say I save my item, I give it one final review. Maybe I look through all of my information here. Everything looks good. I've got my table. All of my lists are here. My attachments are under that executive or administrative content area. Now, as you're building the content here, one thing to note, there is not a reason to duplicate information within the content areas. We'll simply place the information in the content area based on the individuals that need access to it. If everyone gets to see that information and the attachments that are pertaining to that, then it would go under that public content area. If it's information that maybe, internal staff and board members need to see, we would place it under the administrative content area because our staff or our administrative users and our executive users can see administrative content. If it is information that pertains specifically to those executive level users, then of course we would place it under our executive content area. No administrative staff and no public have access to executive content. Only executive users can see that information. Okay. So these executive users can see all the information above their area of content. They can of course see executive content, they can view administrative content, and they can view that public content area as well. So I've double checked everything. It looks good to go. My little paper airplane here is my submit button. So I'm going to say I'm ready to submit it. Gives me the once over. Is this the correct meeting? Is that the right category? Everything looks good. Well, where is that item going to go? And I can select here, maybe I'm going to send this over to the executive director's office. It will populate a list there showing me who's in that approval tree and where it's headed. So if that was not the correct group of people, I can most certainly, come up to my list and select another, a different, maybe that's just going over to the superintendent's office, or maybe I needed this to go over to legal review, whatever that may be. Okay. And I can say, okay. And now once my item is submitted, over on this left-hand side, it puts it in a folder, if you will, by meeting date. And it's possible I may have several folders over there depending on how many items I've submitted to various meetings. As long as that meeting is created in that draft folder, I can submit items to it. So great idea to go ahead and build out maybe your April meeting packet, maybe May, June. So if you want to do 3 or 4 months in advance. But that way, folks that know that they're responsible for items that come up each May or each June or whenever that may be can go ahead and start working on their items and get them over to your agenda perhaps early. And when I do submit my item here, that's what populates that workflow. And you can see we talked about that time and date stamp here, and it tells, of course, I'm the one that created this item, but I'm also the current approver. But I can see who has that item because that current approver will be next to the person's name whose hands it's in. And I can see when the item was submitted and the time and date. And after Charlotte approves it, her name and her time and date would be on there, and it would go over to Karen and then back over to me. Also, if you notice a quick correction that you needed to make while you're in this folder here, and you see that you have your edit pencil, then you can click on that edit pencil, and maybe I needed to update this, to 500 or 650 or whatever that may be. I can always correct that as long as you see that edit pencil. However, once the next person on the approval tree touches that item, you'll notice that your edit pencil will disappear. So you won't have access to that edit pencil anymore. You would either need to notify the next person on that tree that they need to reject the item back to you so that you can make those corrections or updates yourself. Or it might be something that you could ask them to update as it went through that process. Okay. But again, as long as you see your edit pencil, you do have access to edit that item. However, once that edit pencil disappears, you would have to notify someone else on that tree that you needed that item back. Now I'm going to come back out to my featured tab because I want to show you here as well. As that item, I submitted it over to myself because I wanted you to see that now on my dashboard, as soon as I log into BoardDocs, I can see, hey, your action is required here. If I were to click on that item right there, it will take me right over to the item that's waiting on my approval. And I, of course, can review this item here, and I would have my checkbox here to approve that item. Or if it was something I needed to reject, I could reject that item and let them know, hey, that's not the correct amount. It's supposed to be $650, not $550. Or could you reattach this information, update that material? Okay, so you can notify them of why that item was rejected. That way the person could update that information and resubmit it through that workflow process. Okay. If you are within the workflow process, let's say that I was Karen. As Karen, there would be an additional button here for reroute. If I was Karen, I needed to reroute that item back to Charlotte. I didn't want to reject it because if I reject it, it would send the item all the way back to the beginning to the person that originated that item. Maybe I just needed to reroute this to Charlotte for one change. Then I could select that reroute option and it would allow me to send that item back to someone above me within that approval tree. Okay. I'm not seeing it here because I'm not logged in as one of these folks further down in the approval tree, but you'll see it there. It looks like a little circle arrow, and when you hover over it, it'll say reroute, and it'll allow you to pick anyone on that approval tree above you to reroute that item to. So you can do that as well. Now, as we are working on that draft meeting, or that meeting is in our draft folder, if I went over here to my April 19th meeting, again, I can view this meeting in draft state. Can't edit that meeting if I'm a submitter or using that workflow process, but I can view my item here. And maybe I just wanted to make sure that there's my item. So there's my HR report. It's in workflow, and I can view that information here. I can also follow where it is, whose hands it's in here under that workflow area or under that workflow option down here. So a really nice way to allow other departments, other individuals that are already creating those reports or creating those agenda items that are contributing to your meeting packet to do that within BoardDocs. And of course, if we need to set up an online training to walk through setting up approval trees, or even with a group of folks that are going to be utilizing the workflow process, we most certainly can do that. Create some best practices, perhaps create a template for them so they know what type of information you want them to provide, but also creating their own individual templates so they can make it easy and duplicate from those within their My Agenda Items folder. We can most certainly do that. So just let us know. We're happy to do that. Have any questions come through, Andrew, that we can talk about?
Yep, we do have a couple.
Oh, nice.
One, I think it might just be helpful to show again. I answered the question here, but how did you collapse those boxes again on the content areas? That was one question we got.
Yes, good question. And that is so under the, each content area, you'll have these gray, you have to click on the little gray box here. And you can see even there's a tiny little arrow right there. But once you click on that box, that's what collapses those content areas, and you're just seeing the file boxes at that point. And the nice thing too, if you collapse those, perhaps you had one item that needed to go under the executive content area, you had one item that needed to go over here, you had one item that needed to come up here, but you could drag and drop. I'll stay on. But you could drag and drop those into the 3 different content areas very easily from your file box there. Of course, and this is what allows you to move them in between areas too. So I know I work with some subscribers that have items that may be for executive level users only until that item was board approved at the board meeting, and then maybe it becomes public information. And the nice thing with that is after the board meeting, then you can just drag that right up to the public content box and it's public information. So it makes that really nice. And then of course, if you click on the gray box again, it just expands back open those content areas so you can see that again. Yes. Well, good deal. Well, one thing I did want to show you guys is our eGov Live announcement is officially on the website. So yes, September 13th through 15th, We'll be at the JW Marriott in Orlando, so we're really excited about that. I believe registration, I don't think it's opened yet, but pretty soon there'll be a registration link here where you can register. And again, that is included as part of your BoardDocs subscription, along with the 24/7 support, all the ongoing training always included. We also have our eGov Live conference. Lots of fun, put names and faces together. You just have to get there. We get a great rate on the hotel there. And if you have, if you're like me and you've already Googled the JW Marriott in Orlando, it's got a lazy river and all kinds of palm trees and sunshine and some really, it looks like it's going to be a really great venue for us to have our conference at this year. So we're really excited about that. But yes, if there's any other questions, let us know. Of course, if we need to set up any online training opportunities, we're always happy to do that. We do thank you guys for your time today. And yeah, keep us posted on how we can help. Also, if there's any other topics that you guys would like to see us do in these best practice webinars, we are always open for suggestions. So let us know if there's anything else we want to cover as part of our BoardDocs best practice webinar series. Hope you guys all have a great day. I know there's some crazy weather going up in the Northeast, so stay safe, stay warm, and hopefully we will see you guys all in September. Thanks, Andrew, for your help today.
All right, Merritt. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye, guys. See ya.